Well, hello there, everyone. And it is I, Baby Crone, and I am here today because I'm going to be talking about the Bermuda Triangle. Yes, this is something Baby Crone has been working on for the last couple of days, and I'm going to be talking about the mysteries, the science, and the esoteric that all encompasses the Bermuda Triangle. So, first off, we're going to be talking about what exactly is the Bermuda Triangle? Now, if you are not familiar with the Bermuda Triangle, it is located in 3 Pacific locations, which is Miami, Florida, San Juan, Puerto Rico, and then the Bermuda Islands. And together that creates a triangle. That's why it's called the Bermuda Triangle, and it is in the Atlantic Ocean. Now, some interesting things about the Bermuda Triangle is that it's famous for ships, aircrafts, and people just mysteriously disappearing and never to be returned again. And to never be found either. So that's kind of scary. However, nowadays, you don't really hear about that. You don't really hear about the Bermuda Triangle like that and people disappearing. Now, that's a good thing because we do not want people mysteriously disappearing off the planet. And also that must be a terrible death if they really do die in these instances, if they're not teleported or transported through mystical properties. But also because this is a place that is frequently traveled because it's Miami, Florida, the Bermuda Islands, and Puerto Rico. We hear about people living in all 3 of these places. So to hear about the Bermuda Triangle being in this region, you're just like, well, how are we supposed to travel around the Bermuda Triangle? Like, how? It's confusing. Don't worry. People still travel through the Bermuda Triangle and do not get lost these days. And that's because scientists now believe, well, actually, they don't believe, they know that there are causations for why back in the olden days, when there wasn't advanced technology, why planes and ships went missing. However, because technology is much more advanced and scientists can study these types of phenomenons, that there aren't going to be any mysteriously vanishing ships or crafts or anything like that in the Bermuda Triangle these days, which is kind of sad because it's like a legend that died because we got too advanced. But that doesn't stop the fact that there is some hidden properties there for a reason. Like, it's not called the Bermuda Triangle for nothing. It's not like there's a significant reason. Even if people aren't going disappearing today, there is still very much significant things to learn about the Bermuda Triangle. So I am very fascinated to let you guys know. I learned a lot. First off, that the North Atlantic Ocean is the saltiest ocean. Even though it's the 2nd largest ocean next to the Pacific Ocean, which just happens to be very funny because North America is surrounded by the 2 largest oceans from east to west coast. I find that fascinating. However, because it's the saltiest ocean, I know salt is a good way to make water more soluble, which means allow more things to be able to dilute into water, but also salt water allows electricity to conduct through it more often. And what's very important about electricity, besides from the fact that it can kill you, well, electricity is a good type of conductivity and power, and also that our body really runs off of electricity, like not like electricity that powers up computers, no, but we have a neurological system that runs off of electrical impulses that our brain gives off, and that's why technology can read our brain and tell a computer to move our arm or whatever limb body part that's missing. That's what Neuralink is doing. So that's very important to know, because if there could be electricity, imagine if there was like a thunderstorm in the Bermuda Triangle, the electricity is going to be that much more powerful because you're on salty water. And if you get electrocuted by it, I don't think it's going to be very fun. But also, in the North Atlantic Ocean, it just happens to be placed in what is called the Northern Tropics, or the Tropics of Cancer. And why is that? Well, because in the Northern Hemisphere, Cancer marks the peak of summer, well, the start of summer. Like right now we just moved on from Cancer season, and now we're in Leo season, which we're in the middle of summer. And because of this, the way the Earth is tilted on its axis, the way that the northern tropics or the tropics of Cancer receives light is almost entirely. It's like shining a beam of light directly on it, like a spotlight on this light. And light is very important because light is also a good life source, but also because light and electricity are like almost one and the same. So that and salty water, it's even more potent, okay, if you think about it. And also the northern tropics happens to deal with at least North America, because when I'm reading articles, it says it governs our climates. So for the North Americas, our climate is 100% governed by the northern tropics. So whatever is passing through the Bermuda Triangle is most likely going to hit North America or is coming from North America. So therefore, whatever kind of energy or power or storm it's bringing or is going to pass through is also going to affect us in a way. So that's important. But what's also important about water, you're going to find out that literally this conversation today is just about the importance of water and why water is what it is and why we need water. And that Earth is literally mostly water, which we'll get to later. I'm jumping ahead. But because I talked about these 3 locations, Florida, Puerto Rico, and the Bermudas, they all, the way they're located, as you see in this picture right here, this line represents a tectonic plate. However, as you see these black dots right here, which this one in Blake Ridge just happens to be in the location of where the Bermuda Triangle is. These are called cold seeps. And cold seeps are, like they say, cold air. And this cold air is, it sinks down because, like as I said, it's salt water. So if this water is salty and cold, it's going to sink because it's that much heavier. And if it's mixing in with some other oceans, because as I said, the North Atlantic Ocean is the saltiest ocean. However, it's a gradient. It's not like 100% salt. It's mostly extremely salty towards the bottom where the cold seeps are. However, there's hydrothermal vents. As you see these white circles, and hydrothermal vents are, as they say, thermal. So they make the water warm, and when warm water rises, it creates a lot more energy. And these hydrothermal vents also just happen to possibly leak methane gas, and methane gas is A, flammable, but also B, when it gets into the air, it creates more heat because it just happens to be one of the greenhouse gases, which means that when it gets into the atmosphere, it stays in the atmosphere, and it's like aluminum foil. It makes everything much warmer and therefore heats up the earth. So therefore, if we have more methane gas leaking from here mixing with these cold seeps, well, salt water and methane gas just happen to mix together to make brine. And brine, when it's heated, increases conductivity in the water. Now, this is all where the Bermuda Triangle was located. So just think about this. We have conductivity being increased through electricity, but also through methane gas being leaked through the Earth's crust. But because it's salty water and it's cold and dense, it sinks to where the hydrothermal vents are, where this methane gas is being leaked. So therefore, it's going to, as they say, the cold sinks, the heat rises. So therefore, the hot methane gas that's now mixed in with extra salty water is going to be raised up higher to the surface. And then once this hot sun that is being like directly beamed on like a spotlight reaches this surface and basically evaporates the water off of the surface of the ocean, this now methane gas also mixed with salt water is now in the air, which means now there could be brewing storms to be happening. And if there's a lot more salt water or just water in the air, And because methane gas just makes it more flammable, it means water can evaporate more easily. Therefore, there's going to be more storms and even more tragic or severe storms. So therefore, this is just not a good mix for anybody to be really traveling through. And this is why back in the olden times, well, really just like 50 years ago, why there were plane crafts and spaceships being disappeared, because it was like a concoction of a vortex, which is what we're going to be talking about. Apparently, the Bermuda Triangle is not as special as it may seem. There's actually, do not be frightened, 12 places on the planet that does almost exactly the same thing the Bermuda Triangle does. Let that sink in. 12 places on Earth that does what Bermuda Triangle do. That's kind of creepy, but also at the same time shows you that it's not as rare as you think and as dangerous as it really might sound, even though it really is dangerous. However, what makes this popular, well, not popular, it's called the vile vortexes. They call them 10 vile vortexes, but really there's 12, but the other 2 are at the north and south pole, and the other 10 are scattered across the equator, basically. 5 in the northern half of the equator and 5 in the lower half of the equator. So therefore, both the northern hemisphere and southern hemisphere both have their equal amounts of anomalies happening spread across the world. So it's not just one place is special. Everybody gets it evenly. What's with all these bugs? So, interestingly enough, there is called ley lines. Now, these are ancient grids from, I think, Egypt, really. Well, the documentary I watched, it was on the History Channel. It was called Ancient Aliens, and they were talking about these ley lines and pyramids and how really Earth has some type of grid to it that when, supposedly, allegedly, when aliens come to this planet, if these follow these exact ley lines, they're going to have basically endless amount of energy to supply themselves. So really, the aliens put these maps on our Earth to harness the energy for their spaceships. Now, if you don't believe that the pyramids were built by ancient aliens, then ley lines is just another part to say that aliens were here and they are harnessing our energy. And really, who could have honestly built pyramids back then? Those stones are heavy. Okay? No human I could ever think about. Leaving pyramids alone, we're going to be moving on to the shape that you see on this screen, which is called an icosahedron, which is I'm going to be talking about in another episode, but not in another episode, another slide. But this shape is the shape of the world. Not literally, we are a sphere, like a circular Earth, unless you're a flat earther. But we're a circular Earth, like a spherical Earth. However, as I've learned in a book that I've been reading recently talking about infinity and calculus, a circle is basically infinity, so you really can't measure it and encompass it in a particular way. However, an icosahedron is a perfect way to encompass Earth as a sphere, and you're going to find out why later. And why does this Bermuda Triangle, but also the other 12 vile vortexes are important? It all has to deal with the magnetic field, which is another reason why planes would have problems during the Bermuda Triangle, because as I had mentioned when talking about the Northern Lights that did not reach Maryland because they were working off of wrong reports, is that magnetic fields are very powerful, and that really when your compass points north, that's not really the North Pole, even though we call it north. Opposites attract, so north has to be pointing to a magnetic south. Even though we call that the North Pole because the north is pointing that way, in reality it's South Pole that the north is pointing to. And because of this, when ships are in the Bermuda Triangle or just happen to be in these 12 vortexes, north is like south now, like it flips. Like instead of the North like north compass pointing to where it should be, which is magnetic south towards North Pole, it's now pointing to the South Pole, which is magnetic north, which is wrong because opposites, things that are similar repel each other. So if magnetic north is pointing to, if the north compass is pointing to magnetic north, that doesn't make sense because they should be repelling each other. And then that's how, especially if you're like low on like coal or fuel and you're trying to get to a destination and now you're suddenly flying in the wrong direction, yeah, you're going to get lost and possibly die if you don't get sucked into a vortex, which could possibly happen. But I'm moving ahead of myself. I want to talk about these 12 vortexes just in case some of y'all might be interested, because interestingly, of course, there's a pattern to this. I separated this into 2 slides, ones that are on land and ones that are in the ocean. Now, there's, like I said, they really only say there's 10 because the North and South Pole don't count. So if you look at this, if you look right here on this page, once we stop at 5, that means 5 of these vortexes are on land and the other 5 of the 10 vortexes are in the ocean. Now, I just said that 5 of these vortexes are placed in the northern hemisphere and 5 are placed below in the southern hemisphere, all near the equator on top of that. So you tell me how that's planned if ancient aliens didn't do that. I'm just saying. So some of these are megaliths, and megaliths are prehistoric. Yes, we're going ancient, prehistoric monuments of stone or whatever that symbolizes a significant part of culture. Now, right here we have the Algerian megalith, which is actually an African pyramid. I'm not sure if the point is missing or if that's just because it's in a different country, but that's a pyramid in Africa. And then we have Zimbabwe megaliths, which is actually a stone city, abandoned stone city in Zimbabwe, near Madagascar in Africa. And then we have the Mohenjo-Daro, which is in India, northern India, almost near Pakistan. And this is a tomb place, and there's also artifacts that are being basically searched for as we speak at this time. And then I didn't have a picture of it on here, but the Hamakuli volcano. I'm sorry, I do not speak Hawaiian. It's a Hawaiian volcano, and it's located off the coast of North America because it's in Hawaii. And apparently when I Googled this, it's called the Ring of Fire. Not to mix it up with the Ring of Fire of volcanoes that just happens to be surrounding an ocean. That's not a part of it, but it's called the Ring of Fire because apparently it's very destructive. Interesting, it was a volcano. Everything else here is a stone, but here we have a volcano, so I found that one very interesting. And then of course, Eastern Island megaliths located off the coast of Brazil. Now that was 5. Of course, they have the North and South Pole. Those really speak for themselves. Now, this is where it gets real interesting when we start talking about the ocean. Because as I said, water is very important for the Bermuda Triangle, but also for Earth in general. And when you really think about it, humans are mostly made up of water. So water is like very important. So we have the Bermuda Triangle, of course. However, I found out almost directly across from the location where the Bermuda Triangle is on the map, in Japan, basically, is what they call the Dragon's Triangle or the Devil's Sea. And as you see right here, it is a triangle. And I have some pictures of some trenches right here so you can understand what a trench is, because most of these places are located near a trench or a basin, which is a low depression in water that is very deep. But a trench is very special. What's special about a trench? As you see, right where the Devil's Sea is, or the Dragon's Triangle, we have the Mariana Trench. Very, very famous. However, a trench is where, okay, so we have the Earth's crust, right? This is talking about tectonic plates. So this is literally talking about how the Earth renews itself and destroys itself all at the same time. So at a trench, we have land, but going underneath. And what's underneath Earth? Hot lava and molten iron, basically, well, metals. So therefore, basically, Earth is being melted underneath itself, and that's what one part of the trench does. And then there's another part of the trench which, like a conveyor belt, you got to come back around. So now we have a trench that's coming up, building new land. And sometimes we can build little ridges, like tiny mountains. Like that's how mountains are made. Like just how mountains are made on land is how mountains can be made underwater by these trenches, just like tectonic plates moving. So where these trenches are located specifically, we have the new Hebrides Trench. We have the Devil's Sea and the Wharton Basin. And of course the Bermuda Triangle, but that really wasn't located near a trench. And neither is the South Atlantic Anomaly. However, these trenches are very important because, like we said in an earlier video, when the water, well, actually I'm going to be talking about later in this episode, when the water, not the water, but when the Earth's core is basically melting and creating energy and molten lava, basically, we have metal, and metal can generate magnetism. And through that, if you're near a trench, therefore you could have some of Earth's magnetism seeping in or seeping out. So because of that, it could be high points of magnetism in these places. But this is very interesting, the South Atlantic Anomaly. Now, as you see in this picture right here, this entire blue area is the South Atlantic Anomaly. And yes, it's mostly towards the bottom of Brazil and not really in the ocean, but it's South Atlantic because it's in the South Atlantic Ocean, not the North Atlantic Ocean, but still on the same side of the hemisphere. What's interesting about this is where Earth is being like directly hit by its own magnetic field. And that's because of the way the Earth is tilted. Just like I said earlier, the sun hits like a spotlight right beaming on there because of the way the Earth is tilted. Well, the way the Earth is tilted, instead of it being like a perfect like cocoon, it's like a side cocoon. So now we got like more stuff going in one area than it should be. And because of this, it demagnetizes the general area because, yes, certain parts, well, actually all parts of the Earth have its own magnetic field, like its own, for its own little location. However, how do I explain this? So, okay, so you have a lot of magnets, right? Like imagine you lined up magnets in a train. Well, it's like a train of magnets, but because they're like in a row, it creates one big magnet because north connects to south, south connects to north, north connects to south, south connects to north. So therefore it's one chain of one big north at the front and south at the bottom. But there's individual north and south parts because you have, let's say, 20 magnets making up one big gigantic magnet. And that's what Earth is like. Having different parts of its Earth make its own magnetic field. However, that only adds to the Earth's bigger magnetic field that therefore our compasses are really measuring. And because of this, this area just happens to make almost little to no magnetic field of its own and is only getting magnetic fields from Earth. And that's the problem, because that means sometimes a compass can go awry here because, like we said, north can suddenly become south and south can suddenly become north. So therefore it can also be a problem when you're in these areas. So that was a really long explanation about, hey Franny, that was a very long explanation to talk about the South Atlantic Anomaly. However, it brings us right into talking about Earth's magnetic field, as I was talking about, as this picture right here depicts. This is in the center, as this is outlined in white, is the Earth's core, the iron core that is generating its own magnetic field. However, as you see, as I said, this will be considered the North Pole because it's pointing north. However, it's really the south magnetic pole. And because of this, things can go awry. So blue is the south magnetic field and the orange is the north magnetic field. And because of this, as you see, it can get tangled up in the center. And because it gets tangled up in the center, that's where we can have some of the anomalies go wrong. And if you see, oh, I am just noticing this. If you look very closely, if you look right here, like right along this line, it almost looks like there is something missing. Like there isn't as strong of a magnetic field. And it's like really like this kind of like bowl shape around it. And that could represent the equator. And if it is representing the equator, where it would be pretty equal in its magnetic field, because it's the center of the earth, basically, as you see, the north and south is tangling up around here. And these are where our 12 vile vertexes will be placed, along 5 above the equator, 5 below the equator. And therefore the magnetic fields can get messed up. However, something that is very interesting, as I was talking about light and magnetic fields and energy. Now, why is this very important? Because not only is a magnetic field generated, this is an electromagnetic field. And what is an electromagnetic field? An electricity generated magnetic field. Now, really, you can't have one without the other. With electricity, you're going to have magnetism. And with magnetism, you're just going to have electricity. Now, it just depends on which waveform are you going to see. You're either going to see the electricity or you're either going to see the magnetism, but you're not going to see both. And what's very important about this concept is that I learned that electromagnetism is light. Literally, that's what light is made out of, electromagnetic waves. Now, these waves are very important because if you look at Einstein's very famous equation, E equals mc squared, don't let me lose you here. Now, I said light is electromagnetic waves, right? Light is literally the speed of light. That's what they're talking about when they say light. Like any light with no vacuum, like if we're in a vacuum, travels at the speed of light. And if light's not traveling at a speed of light, it's because it's in something that's preventing it from traveling its full speed, basically friction. Now, water is very good at creating this type of friction for light. It like bends light like pretty badly. Like light could be going straight and then suddenly it's like that's how bad water bends light. Now, because of this, Earth is mostly made of water, right? Now, back to Einstein's equation. Light can be contributed to the speed of light, which is the variable c, as you see in this equation. And m stands for a mass. Anything that has mass, whether that's a ship, an airplane, a human, has mass. Now, when you put mass going like the speed of light squared, like double the speed of light, mass is going, is basically converted to energy. Now, why is this important? This is where the vile vertexes are dealing with electromagnetic energy of the Earth. And if it just happens to be so powerful, where it's located near water, if a mass just happens to travel into this area with the right types of conditions, they could end up traveling at the speed of light, like a vortex, and suddenly turn into energy and then go poof, like that, like literally off of the face of the Earth, like a teleportation. Don't know where they went, no way to get back, like a portal. Now, this is why this is very important. And this also, as I said, an isosahedron can be contributed to the Earth. And why is this important? Well, when you happen to look, okay, this isosahedron. Now, to tell you the big aha moment, the isosahedron in ancient times was associated with the element water, which Earth just happens to be mostly made up of. So that's why the icosahedron is the perfect fit to describe Earth, because Earth is mostly made of water. So a shape that contributes to water and represents water, why not have that be our Earth? Now it just so happens to fit, because if you look at this shape right here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 points scattered. If this just so happens to be the equator, 5 points above, 5 points below, just like the vile vertexes. But no, that's not even greater. They're shaped like a triangle, which is also a part of sacred geometry, which is all about unity and the Holy Trinity and bringing things together. Now, if you're wondering what does that have to do with anything, a portal brings things together like a vortex, swishing it, condensing it all into one point, and then pop, pop, teleport it somewhere else. And this isn't even where it begins. As I counted these points right here, and what do these points just happen to be called? Vertexes. Now you tell me how that makes sense. I was geeking out the entire time while I was researching this, because I'm just like, shapes truly are the way of the world. Our world really can be described by math. However, this picture right here depicts the 12 anomalies, well, the 10 anomalies as triangles. However, they're only points of triangles. And if you really think about it, the North and South Pole, which just happen to make the 12 vortexes, so therefore that shows you even more how this icosahedron literally points out all the 12 vertexes perfectly, and shows you that it's no coincidence that the Earth happens to have them in these specific locations. And you tell me how that we just happen to know that these places are shaped out like this if it wasn't for aliens and ley lines and pyramids. Triangles. Vertexes used as energy points to basically supply their energy field if they were on spacecrafts. It's allegedly, according to ancient aliens on the History Channel. Now you make that make sense. It's like a tabletop. You know when you spin a tabletop and it's on a point? Dreidel. Yeah. Now, I talked about portals, but don't even get me started. Portals actually exist. And NASA said they're so unpredictable that they literally come and go out of existence. And why is that? Because it just happens to be disturbances in the Earth's magnetic field. Now you tell me how we are now just discovering this, yet we've always lived in it. Yet the pyramids are like from our ancient times, like are like older than our ancestors. And yet we're finding out today, we're like unraveling these mysteries and learning that these anomalies and weird paranormal activities really aren't weird, and science can explain them, but science can only explain it so far because it has an esoteric reasoning to it, because it's outside of us, because it's aliens. At least in my opinion, it's aliens. I'm a avid alien lover over here, 100%. Okay, so I believe that like literally the higher dimensional beings, like esoteric beings, the people that we look for outside of ourselves, put maps and things for us to find out and discover, like puzzles, but also for them to use when they get here, which also, this is my little conspiracy theory, that's why the government works with them in secret, because they don't want us to know anything about anything we can find out, and they just want us to keep guessing and wondering about these things so we don't utilize them for our own benefits. Okay, now back to whether these 12 anomalies, vertexes, are very dangerous, or are they spiritual? Because if you think about it, you're getting teleported somewhere. Yeah, that sounds scary, but you're getting teleported somewhere. How do you know it just won't happen to be somewhere where you just happen to be able to support and sustain your own life? You could literally get ported to another dimension and like living a whole nother life. You could be like ported to a dimension where you were never lost, And now, I'm sorry, my cat. And now you've came to this universe and somebody's just like, I've been looking for you. Or like maybe we're like in a coma or something. Like this works weirdly, okay? You like died, but not died at the same time in like a portal. Like you're gone from our reality, but you exist in some other reality. Like everything, everywhere, all at once. My cat is so high up in a tree right now. Oh my God. But talking about these magnetic fields, right? Okay, this has to deal with the sun. So the sun's magnetic fields, this is why this portal is actually spiritual. The sun's magnetic field interacts with the Earth's magnetic field. And together, when they happen to find a way to connect, there's energy that goes poof. And when that energy goes poof, a temporary portal is open and then closed. Scientists can't explain it. They don't know why. They call it X points because, as I learned in physics, magnetic lines are never supposed to cross. And I guess I now know why. Because when they cross, X marks the spot. Boom, 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 we're going to have some energy and who knows what's going to happen. After all, these are magnetic fields. And as I said, if a mass is just happening to move at the speed of light and light is magnetic and electromagnetic waves, then if you're moving at the speed of light and you're just happen to have mass on you, you're going to be converted to energy. And where is this energy going to get teleported? Who knows? It's energy and you just happen to get sucked into a vortex unintentionally with no purpose on where you're going. So let's be careful where you land. But so really, as you see, this circle right here represents the portal that just happens to be open when these two magnetic fields cross. And it's because the north and south just happens to connect with each other, but also because it's getting tangled up with the sun. They also, it's like north and south getting all twangled up again. Just like when they get tangled up in the earth, we have 10 points of magnetic anomalies where things can go wrong in the earth's atmosphere, which could just possibly affect certain locations on the earth for these portals. Because if it's in the earth's atmosphere, there's got to be some way for you to get to that from the earth's atmosphere. So maybe that's why I said these has to be the cooked up right conditions. It's not like you're just going to go to these 12 places and you're just automatically going to be disappeared. No. People, all 12 of these places we know are fully habitated by people and animals in life. So we know you're just not going to disappear off of the face of the earth just going there. It has to be the right kind of concoctions, the right type of electricity, the right type of magnetism, the right kind of day, the right kind of solar activity, the right kind of earth activity. Are you on water? Are you on land? What do you just happen to have on your body at that time? What do you happen to have on your mind at that time? Because really everything is consciousness. So maybe, and everything's planned for a reason, so you could just really be teleported there because it was just your time and it's going to serve a purpose for history. But you know, that's a bit morbid when you think about destiny, because that means life really is planned out and we have no control over it. But we do have control over it to some extent. There are things outside of us that we can't deal with. Which brings us to this picture of a vortex. So you guys can understand of being sucked in. And just like I talked about trenches, trenches are called subduction zones, where things are getting literally ducted underneath, and like it's just like these places. I've literally talked about this for so long, and I've studied so much, and I just feel like the earth as we know it is much more spiritual than we know it. But that's just because everything's hidden from us, that when we discover it on our own and know we can't harness these capabilities by our own doings, it's just kind of like, well, how do they know and how can they prove this, like the scientists? But science and math proves it. I'm a STEM major. And my research is proven, even when looking at conspiracy websites to trying to find information about these places, there was scientific evidence to back it up. And it made sense when I started looking at the reasons for why this happens. And I'm just like, yeah, it scientifically makes sense why this would happen. And why science would say, yeah, this is hocus pocus, non-spiritual stuff, because we can prove it with science. But how can you prove where we go when we're teleported and disappear? You can't prove that. So there's a second part of the equation we're not looking at, we're unable to identify, because it's energy. And who knows, maybe it's working on a quantum level, which, as I mentioned in the video before, it's not supposed to make sense when you're looking at quantum physics. But it makes sense when it talks about the universe, because that's what it explains. So for some reason, I guess we're not supposed to understand certain things because it's higher dimensional knowledge for our brains. So I'll leave that alone. So with that being said, I'll leave you with a food of thought that I saw somebody's shirt. I just want to geek out with this with you guys. The guy's shirt said, my password is the last 8 digits of pi. And pi is an infinite number, and it doesn't have an end. Just like a vortex. I mean, it has an end, but where is the end is the question. Nobody's come back to tell us. So with that being said, like infinity in a circle, with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and it was very lengthy because I had a lot to present, because it wasn't just about the Bermuda Triangle. The Bermuda Triangle brought up other parts of the world that I just did not know existed, but because it's just right in our backyard, because I'm in North America, it's the most common and talked about here in this country. So with that being said, I hope you guys learned a little bit about the earth, and that really everything is planned in place strategically. I'm not going to talk about how I learned that there's literally arrows that were used in prehistoric time for airplanes to fly, so that way they know where we're going, and that they're no longer used today. So that shows you how certain things were used back then that were there for a reason, and we've grown and evolved. And that's why the Bermuda Triangle and all these places just happen to no longer have disappearance like they used to. So really their legacy and mysteriousness is slowly going away. But us esoteric lovers and conspiracy theorists and really truth seekers are going to look out for this information and try to make sense of it, because it has something to do with us. So with that being said, with that long ending, I will talk to you guys later. Sunflowers!